John, Anik, and Kenny Florian podcast. John, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
I f***ing love them. I can't get enough of them.
Let's hear that Boston next.
Big jab there from Duffy, and Frank Mir is hurt now. Down goes Duffy, out cold. Frank Mir does it again. Rock'em sock'em robots here. Oh my goodness.
Hyperbole.
They're a couple of absolutely self-involved bull artists.
Here are your hosts, John, Anik, and Kenny Florian.
Oh, good to be back in your collective lives as we get ready for the monster that is UFC 290, Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, coming up this weekend. Welcome in episode 420 of the Anik and Florian podcast. If you're so inclined on this 420th episode, put something in the air. Might be better for it. We're going three wide off the top of the show today as we are joined by Big Gun Brian Petrie. And man, people don't know how talented you are when it comes to your hands. I mean, we know you can pick fights, but this kid's an avid boxer. You and Ken-Flo fucking geeking out in the pre-show.
Yeah.
New boxing gloves or something?
Yeah, let me see these gloves. Let me see these gloves.
So I'm little clitoris, little Mexico's finest. So I messaged Kenny because there's a glove called Winning brand from Japan. They're one of the best. I've had a few pair before. I messaged him. I wanted a green pair, green or hard. They're a custom color. So I was like, Ken-Flo, you said you got to connect. He hooked up with his guy because Ken-Flo's the man. He's always got to connect. And the dude's like, yeah, we got him, but 12 or to 8 to 10 to 12 months. I'm like, what the I'm too impatient for that. So Kenny recommended these. These are one of the few brands I've never tried. I'm excited to hop off here. I'm going to go to my garage. I'll maybe post some videos of me working the hands a little bit just so people know that, you know, your boy's got it still with this old age of me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can invite the Anik and Florian podcast to collaborate on your content so we can start to show our listenership.
Sure.
Because people just don't get it. Like when I told some fighter in Jacksonville that you were 6'3", they almost said, like, I got to see that to believe it. Like the answer.
Yeah. I'm a bit, like we talked about this a week or two ago. I'm a big, thick boy. Yeah. I have a baby face. So people are a little like, oh, you know, he's probably this or not. No, you know, my mom's 6 foot. So it runs in the family. So we're good.
We call you Big Gun. I've given out a few nicknames over the years. The most recent nickname I've given out, actually, Michael Eaves, Emmy Award-winning SportsCenter anchor, and you'll see him actually this weekend anchoring our coverage at UFC 290. But he's from Kentucky, and so I call him Big Kentucky. And he's like, I've never had a nickname, and he fucking loves it. You know,
I love
like
it too.
we could call you Big Cincinnati or something like that, but you're already Big Gun. The gloves are branded. Like you already have a nickname.
Branded. It's in there. It's in there. I'm talking with my tattoo artist right now. I'm getting this sleeved up. We're working on it. And I'm thinking maybe on the other side, just in between like long sections, he can throw like a big gun on me or something like that. Just get some brand on the other side. I love it. You know, Cody, Don, the nickname on it. See, I have such a growing up, Petrie was my last name. So no one calls me Brian. Everyone called me Petrie, which I loved, right? I didn't care. You can call me whatever you want. So it was kind of dope when Cody dropped that nickname on me because I'm like, fuck, I finally got one. There it is. Because you can't nickname yourself, or I would, but you can't.
Right.
So
no, that's true. Cody's actually pretty good, knows his name around a nickname, knows his way around a nickname. He gets credit for Dark Horse, Chris Dark Horse Dawkins.
I like that.
Chris hasn't adopted it like on Fight Night, but he has subscribed to the
I still like the backyard shed you came up with, Johnny. The backyard shed. I wish you would adopt that. That's great.
Yeah. Alir Latifi is the goddamn backyard shed. All right, so a lot to get to. UFC 290 coming up in a few days. I just want to sort of put a bookend on the UFC Fight Night stuff with Brian Petrie, or Petrie, as he is often referred. And I also want to talk to you about your boy Chris Curtis, injecting his name into the conversation to try to get that spot against Jack Della Maddalena. Now, if you don't know, Sean Brady was forced out of this slot against Jack Della at UFC 290. Staph infection. Brady ended up in the hospital. We wish him an expeditious recovery. But Jack Della essentially called for any 170 or 185-pound fighter to step up. And there were a handful of fighters that did step up, some publicly, some privately. Your guy, Chris Curtis, who we were thought was going to sit out for a while. Then he goes and accepts the fight in September, and now he wants this one. It looks like they're going to give it to an undefeated newcomer with some LFA experience, but the King of Combat certainly put his name in the hat.
Yeah, he did. I had talked to him about this. I talked to him when he signed the Fluffy fight. I said, so you just are just taking the hardest fights possible, right? We're just not taking time off. You're getting a guy who's on, and he just said to me, he's like, I like the matchup. He's like, I'm finally not fighting someone 6'2", and he's going to come forward. He's like, I'm not worried about his wrestling. I like this fight for me. So that gave me confidence. Didn't talk to him the Jack Della Atlanta fight, but that just makes sense. That's Chris. I mean, I've told this story before. Chris was eating a buffet at a local show. Someone goes, hey, does MD want to fight heavyweight? He's like, sure, I will. This is amateur days. Pops in, destroys his heavyweight in a matter of seconds. The guy, not even joking, shit his pants in the cage because he was so surprised Chris jumped on him like that. That's just his mentality this guy has. I'm glad he didn't take the Jack Della Atlanta fight because, I mean, that would have been really fun for the fans. But three-name Jack is my guy. He's up there. I think he's really good. But another Ohio guy, Josiah Harrell, Ohio boy, he's popping in there. So good for him. And Chris has some nice words like, hey, I got my notice. I got my call up on 24 hours notice. This changes lives. Hopefully this can change this young man's life. So that's good.
DraftKings Sportsbook, Kenny, does have a line on the new fight for Jack Della Maddalena, minus 950 against the newcomer Josiah Harrell, who is plus 600. So Jack Della goes from minus 170 or so against Sean Brady to now being prohibitively favored against this Josiah Harrell. Kenny, I tweeted about this over the weekend. Oftentimes we see these high-profile slots open up, and you don't know promotionally how they're going to proceed, right? They're giving Jack Della Maddalena a guy who's never fought in the UFC instead of somebody who might be in the top 15, right? But Joaquin Buckley is a good example to bring up here. He was on the Anik and Florian podcast a few weeks ago, realized some success at 85, but clearly in the UFC, welterweight is the best division for Joaquin Buckley. But that means he can't necessarily step up on short notice and get his body down to 171. So even though maybe he had interest in this fight and Jack Della had interest in Joaquin Buckley can't make the weight. And like Kenny, I know you compete in a different era, but there's no way you can make 56 with like 11 days notice in your fighting prime. And I don't know if I'm asking a question or if I'm just making a comment, but these high-profile slots are going to keep materializing, and the fighters who compete closer to their natural weight and stay ready are the guys who potentially can throw their names in the hat.
Absolutely. There's a couple things, right? It depends on how ready they actually are. And it also depends on what stage of your career you're at. Are you a guy that is just starting? Are you a guy that has a few fights and you're trying to establish yourself in the division and get people to kind of be aware of you? Or are you already a well-established elite fighter in the top 10 or top 5? I would say the guy in the top 5, top 10 probably doesn't need to take that fight. It probably isn't wise to take that fight because you're already at the top of the ladder, and every little thing matters if you're talking about fighting the elite. Maybe not so in the middle of the pack of the division and other guys, but I don't know, taking those fights, taking the right fights, taking the right opportunities, and at the right times really matters. I think when I took a fight on maybe 3 weeks notice against Dean Thomas, that was a critical point in my career. I was trying to get a new contract. I was trying to get my name out there a little bit more. I wanted to fight, a top level talent, Dean Thomas, I considered him that. He was around the sport for a long time. So for me, that was a huge point. If I didn't say no, or if I said no to that fight, my whole career could have been completely different. So how you take these and when you take those is so important, man.
It is interesting. And even if your career, Kenny, wouldn't have been totally different had you not accepted that fight, unequivocally, it would have been different in some way, shape, or form. I just think it's an interesting conversation because in the case of Chris Curtis, Bry, he's a middleweight, and they wanted to keep Jack Della competing at 170 pounds. The kid he's fighting, I think, plies his trade as a lightweight, at least some of the time. So
yeah, right. Yeah, he's a 155er. Dennis Bazook, who we all know and love, he is a 45er. He's like, I want in UFC, I'll take the fight. Right. I saw him on Twitter. That makes sense that a 55er is popping up. Josiah just fought. It kind of went viral. He double-legged his opponent through the cage door. I don't know if you guys saw that. and the fight had to get stopped.
No.
That was the most recent fight. So 155 going up to 70 makes sense. He's a thick kid. But yeah, Chris stays at 185 because he's getting a little older. Most of his career is at 170, but he did that so he can take short notice fights. I mean, the guy's 192. I mean, maybe 200 if he gets really fat, but he likes being able to cut a little bit of weight, get that 85. That's what got him in the UFC with the Phil Hawes fight. And then he took the Brendan Allen fight on short notice as well. So yes, I agree with you, though. That is a big point that I make a lot of times, too. I think fighters should stay closer to the natural weight. I think that just makes the most sense so they can take fights on short notice. And then when you get an established career or whatever, then you're like, okay, I can fight wherever I want. I call the shots now.
Some people are saying it's too bad we can't get Nate Diaz to step up and face Jack Della Maddalena on short notice. And I'm excited to promote Josiah Harrell and see what he can do. But
yeah,
I don't know. I was just thinking about a lot of guys. Matthew Semmelsberger's fighting later this month. I mean, the chance to fight Jack Della Maddalena at International Fight Week is a career changer, a potentially life-altering opportunity, and it goes to one Josiah Harrell. Couple other things I wanted to hit on UFC Fight Night: Strickland versus Magomedov. Nursultan Ruzaboyev, Benoit Saint-Denis, Michael Morales. I mean, Ken-Flo, you love this Morales kid. What were your thoughts, Kenny, on Michael Morales over Max Griffin? Unanimous decision, 29-28 times 3.
Yeah, this was one of the ones I got right. I was happy that, that I highlighted the athleticism heading into that fight, because that really was the difference. Morales athletically was just superior. He was stronger. He was faster, really, in every way. And it seemed like he went in there very well prepared, and also dealing with adversity, getting hit in the eye, having that swelling early. I think he's going to learn a ton from that fight. I'm still high on this kid, man. That's a big win. That guy that he faced has a ton of experience. And the fact that he was able to get out there with the win and kind of, I don't want to say, well, he did kind of look like he was more experienced later down in the fight. He was just making better decisions, but skill-wise, he was just superior. Athletically-wise, he was superior. I think he's going to be in a great position in the future. Still a young kid, and definitely has a bright career ahead of him.
That might actually be the first Ecuadorian to win a UFC title. Might be Chito Vera, might very well be Michael Morales. I was hugely impressed with him. Big spot for Benoit Saint-Denis against one of the Bonfim brothers, Brian Petrie. Any thoughts on that main card win for the Frenchman Saint-Denis?
Yeah, burn me bad, man. I had Bonfim in my parlay. I had him straight up as well. I really liked his aggressiveness. I thought Benoit Saint-Denis was hittable, but man, he came out throwing those kicks. Had to have broke a rib, deaded his arm for sure. I mean, and that's what he said in his post-fight. His coaches were like, just kick his arms, make his arms dead, then we take him down. That's what he did. I thought Bonfim was a little bit better on the ground than he was. He gave up some really big, there's some holes there, some really glaring weaknesses as well. And Benoit Saint-Denis just looked like a killer in there. One-way traffic. He took some big shots as well as some of the small moments Bonfim had. But back to Michael Morales. Real quick, do you guys remember him being that big?
No.
He looked huge. His back looked like a bag of ropes. I'm like, when did this kid get so big? He looked amazing though. But I was shocked because Max Griffin's a good sized kid for 170. I was like, whoa. Like I was shocked. But yeah. Benoit Saint-Denis looked like an animal in there.
I think you're right though. Michael Morales, I think it's probably twofold, right? He's a young man, so we saw him 20, 21 years old. So some of that is just age and filling out a little bit, and probably some strength and conditioning as well. Kenny, did you see that Benoit Saint-Denis choke? It's a rear naked choke, not under the chin necessarily. Did you happen to see that fight ending sequence?
I didn't, man. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm just curious, like how, and it's hard having not seen the visual evidence, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but like rear naked choke versus neck crank, tapping when there's pressure on the chin versus underneath that actually closes off, an artery. Like, what are we talking about here on the chin versus underneath?
Right. No, great question, man, because, there are a few different ways that you can finish a rear naked choke. Sometimes it is the choke itself, right? That is like a legitimate excuse to tap. You're going to go to sleep. It's on, the carotid artery of the neck. Some of the arteries are getting cut off. It's shutting off the blood to the brain. You either go to sleep or you tap. The other way is by having it on the chin, on the jaw. You could break someone's jaw. But the thing is, a lot of times it's the pain of the hold, right? You're threatening, or it's bruising the teeth, the mouth, the jaw, and you decide to tap. Different thing. That's more level of pain and how much you can take it. You can tap someone out that way as well. We've seen other guys actually from the body triangle. So you're in kind of the rear naked choke position, but you're putting pressure, let's say, on the spine, or, maybe you're twisting the neck. So sometimes it's more spinal, to quote the great Mike Tyson, that it's affecting more of the neck or the spine. And you tap because of that, because you're in a funky position or you feel something getting twisted. So there are different ways that you can finish. I guess in some cases you have to be in that position, and sometimes people just tap because they give up and they don't feel they're going to get out. That's kind of inexcusable in my opinion. But sometimes there are legitimate reasons for tapping out, I guess, besides getting actually choked.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Brian, before we spin this thing forward, featured prelim last weekend, Rinat Fakhretdinov over Kevin Lee, 55 seconds into the fight. So those expecting to see this rejuvenated Kevin Lee, I mean, we didn't get a lot of fight footage. What were your thoughts on Fakhretdinov with like 20 straight wins or something?
So Fakhretdinov is an absolute stud. I thought we were going to get a little bit better of a Kevin Lee. He was a little lazy in there. His hands were still down low. He got clipped with that right hand, and then the power guillotine just put him out. There was no urgency of him. It looked like he was like trying to stay calm, but also you got to realize you're in there with a killer, because Rinat was confident coming forward, and he looks like the real deal. He's big at 170. Well, I know Kevin Lee is a 55er naturally. I know 165 might be his perfect weight class, but Rinat looked big in there. He filled up after the weigh-in. And he's shown he's good everywhere. Stand up good. His right hand was clean. It was no telegraph. Straight right hand was beautiful. And then that he just jumped right to the choke. Like he's a killer. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he's not finishing people. Well, he finished Kevin Lee pretty fucking quick. Yeah. This dude is someone definitely to keep an eye out for. 170, man. I've been saying it for a while. 170, jam pack. Ian Gary, Rinat Fakhretdinov, Jack Delaman. I mean, we got some really exciting fights for the future. I can't wait.
Second half of 2023 is going to be insane.
Sorry, John. I was going to say Kevin Lee looked like he was massive, by the way. But to me, he looked like something was off mentally. Like I don't know if he thought he was in a sparring match or something. I don't know what was going on mentally. He just didn't seem right. I don't know how many jabs he needed to take to realize he was in a fight. Right. He's been in the UFC before. I don't know. Something looked very off to me. And I don't know, man. It must be frustrating because, if you're a part of his camp or used to be a part of his camp, you see the potential. Yeah. Physically he's very gifted, but he's just not putting together. He's actually regressing, which is very concerning. So that was tough to see Kevin Lee lose like that under those circumstances. Obviously facing a tremendous fighter in that one, but I don't know. Something didn't seem right to me with Kevin Lee competing that night.
Yeah, Kevin Lee, former UFC interim lightweight title challenger. Maybe it was the Apex messing with him. I know he had complained during Fight Week about competing in that setting, but hugely competitive night for bonuses. Elvis Brenner and Guram Kutataladze getting the fight of the night. That shit was just insane. Performance bonus winner Sean Strickland and Nursultan Ruzaboyev. Amazing that Rinat Fakhretdinov did not get a performance bonus, but again, a lot of competition, right? We just talked to Chepe Mariscal on Monday, and hopefully there's something in the mail for that gentleman. But we got to spin it forward. UFC 290 is going to be epic. International Fight Week 2023, just a few days away. Championship doubleheader. Will the all-timer Alexander Volkanovski remain the man, or will the interim champ Yair Rodriguez usher in a new era at featherweight? Well, you can place your bets not now, but right now for UFC 290 on DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC, and new customers can bet just $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Everyone can take the action to the next level as well with DraftKings same fight parlays. You string together multiple bets from the same fight for a shot at an even bigger payout. A lot of different ways to attack the board this weekend, and our handicappers are moments away from sharing their expertise. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code AFPOD. New customers can bet just $5 on UFC 290 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly only this Saturday on DraftKings Sportsbook with code AFPOD. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, 800-327-5050, or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. in Tennessee and Kansas. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.com. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/MMA terms. So for some people, gambling may be a problem. For this room, it's a solution.
Hey.
A solution for me during this Major League Baseball season where we continue to hit them straight. Before we get into our main event challenge and I update the standings, we do have a pronunciation of the week for you ladies.
Oh, here we go. All right.
This one's a doozy. So this fighter is one half of the first fight of the night. He faces Kamuela Kirk in the lightweight division, represents Killcliff FC, South Florida, USA. He's making his second UFC appearance this weekend.
Sure.
First name, Esteban Brian Petrie. Who's the fighter I'm talking about, kid?
Yeah, so you said this one's a doozy. Now you're throwing me through a fucking loop because I think I'm going to nail it here. I'm going to put a little Spanish on this one. We got Esteban Ribovics. I think I can crush that. Ribovics? Ribovics? Right? Okay, let's hear it.
Esteban Ribovics. Esteban Ribovics.
Oh, I can't roll my tongue. I mean, I can't do that. That's just impossible for me.
That's a hit.
You put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
So Kenny used to be like employed in the foreign language space, right? This is an Argentine fighter, right? And he says Ribovics, right? He puts a D on the front end, right, Kenny? But it's sort of part of the role. So the reason I brought this file to the masses today, and again, perhaps Kenny will correct us, but we said Ribovics on the broadcast, like Ribovics, like you roll it if you can, but we don't add that D. And Cody, if you can re-rack the file for me one time, like if you hear him say it, he almost adds like a D to the front end.
Esteban Ribovics. Esteban Ribovics.
Like, Kenny, what am I supposed to do with that fucking D on the front of his name?
Yeah, it's not a D. It's a ri. So it's just the rolling of the R. So you're correct in how you're saying it, Ribovics, but it's more, it's just like the rolling of the R and instead of Ribovics, Ribovics.
Right.
So you'll see the accent. I don't see the accent there over the O, but in any case, yeah, you are correct. And a lot of it also is, the how they say it. There's different accents and how you roll the R's, but you're definitely not. You don't have to say Ribovics. You could say Ribovics. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds so good when you say it, but
it does.
If you put yourself in my shoes, right, and forgive my ignorance, right, I failed French 101 and 102 and cheated in French 201, right? But like, I get that file and he's like a Ribovics, and I'm like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that D on the front end?
By the way, how about John? Before it was at Kutate Latse, like he riffed off like 3 or 4
really
last
tough names
that were so fucking tough, and he just made it look like, this guy, the other guy,
casual.
I don't know how he does it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of practice, a lot of repetitions. All right, let's update those standings. Team Florian led it by $675 going into UFC Fight Night. You both went 3-3, but as we sort of alluded to, because Ismael Bonfim was minus 315, and Melissa Gatto, you guys could have had that one as well, but she was minus 200. So both ended up in the red, minus 315 for Ken-Flo, minus 215 for Brian Petrie. Had a 2-unit whack on Grant Dawson. Nice job by both of you on the main event. Brian, really good job on the co-main.
Yeah, I think, I've doubted Grant Dawson a lot, and I thought that he was going to do exactly what he did. I think he's just such a specialist at this point. And my big hit came from Strickland. I almost texted a group chat and was like, I'm putting everything on Strickland. I told the good friend of the podcast, Evan Longoria, I said, put everything on Strickland. I just had a feeling that he was going to do that. It was a 4-unit hit for me on the week, which kind of saved my night because I put a lot in the parlay. But yeah, decent little reads on the co-main and main event for your boy, which I'm happy about.
BP, I don't think Gatto did herself any favors, but what do you think of that decision? Because I thought Gatto won. I think first round it wasn't emphatic. Like she did some things that I think hurt her a little bit. But what do you think of that decision?
Yeah, I had Gatto winning. My group chat, a couple of my buddies who gamble as well, they had Lipsky, but they also bet at Lipsky, so that's also like a green color. I thought Gatto did enough. I mean, you're not going to hear me run to the robbery or anything like that, but I thought she did enough. But I also thought she looked a little rusty. I thought that year away kind of hurt her. I think she didn't really kind of get in the gear. I would like more kicks. That front kick she has is devastating, but I think Lipsky looked good as well. I mean, the Amanda Nunes training down there has really changed her career for sure.
She looked better.
Yeah, I thought Gatto won, but again, I'm not going to, there's no tweet coming from me about that one.
But let us be clear. This year, during this main event challenge, when you guys have hit fights, right, it seems like you hit them going away. And when you lose them, it seems like you're on the wrong end of like every close fight all year. It's crazy. So the updated standings, Team Florian minus 1245. Team Petrie is minus 1820 as we come up on UFC 290. Volkanovski versus Rodriguez. I can't wait to get to Las Vegas. For me, it's nice to get that Hall of Fame induction ceremony out of the way so then I can put all of my focus on the fights. But I'm excited to chop this up with you guys today. And we are going to start with a prelim fight live on ABC and ESPN at 205 pounds. We're actually picking this fight instead of picking the Jack Della Maddalena fight today, as he is fighting a UFC newcomer. Jimmy Crute minus 115. Alonzo Metafield is minus 105. Immediate rematch, guys, of a fight that took place back at UFC 284 in February in Perth. They fought to a draw, and Brian Petrie, both fighters believe that this was the right course of action to run it back, and that's what they'll do this weekend. On which side do you fall?
Yeah, so I see a lot of MMA Twitters early. Guys I respect are all over Jimmy Crute. They're already loading up at the low number. He was a pick 'em early this week. He's climbed a little bit, or when the line opened, excuse me. Man, I don't know. The first fight, he got dropped 3 times. The only thing that saved him was takedowns. I mean, we can't question the guy's heart, but this was a guy that came in the UFC and everyone thought was kind of next up. And then he had a string of bad losses. And with Menifield, who I know is getting better, and cardio is a problem, takedown offense has been a problem, but he's getting better. He's sledgehammers on his, on his hands. But Jimmy Crute's been a little bit of a disappointment. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think he's been a little bit of this is a fight that he should win by taking the fight down and using his superior grappling submissions. But he didn't really show that in the first fight. It was more of a brawl. Menifield power out of a lot of those positions, which shouldn't really happen if you're really crisp on the ground. And I feel like Crute is now coming in looking to kind of bang it out, look for the fun fight, right? With that being said, I'm going to go Jimmy Crute. I don't have a strong opinion on this fight. I'm going to go Crute just because I do think he's the more well-rounded fighter. I think he can land some takedowns, and if he fights smart without the brute Crute, you know what I mean, the brute mindset, you know what I mean, I think he can get this done. But I'm not sleeping on Menifield. Again, I'm a little lukewarm on this fight, if I'm being honest.
No, I think that's fair. I think relative to expectations, Jimmy Crute at 4-3-1 in the UFC has underachieved. He's still just 27, long on potential. On the other side, the unbeaten streak for Alonzo Menifield, Kenny, is now 3 fights, only lost once since 2020. But he is 35 years of age, taking on the younger party, Jimmy Crute, who is 27. No denying Menifield's found a kinship with Pat Barry. That has paid dividends. What are your thoughts, Kenny, on this immediate rematch at light heavyweight, and will you have a selection?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think this is good matchmaking here because they're very similar in that both fighters will allow their opponents to try to win this fight. And if they don't win the fight, then they kind of find a way to kind of battle back. And, I think there might be a few of those opportunities that both those guys will give up to the other guy. And that's what makes it a little tricky as far as picking, because Crute, I think from a skills perspective, is the better guy. But like Brian said, will he fight smart? If he fights smart, he should win. I haven't seen him fight smart yet. That's the thing. Even in his wins, you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You had the fight. Why are you doing? Why are you standing up with him? Or why are you going to the ground unnecessarily? It's just like some of the decisions he makes, they're just head scratchers. But I don't know. Hopefully, a little bit of this time off, a little bit of this ability to kind of think about his game is going to allow him to go out there and actually utilize his skills or lead with his skills in this fight. And if he does that, he should win. But Menifield isn't going to be easy to go away either. But I like Crute here as well.
The Bendigo bomber Jimmy Crute needs a W. We'll see if he can get it against Alonzo Menifield. Actually, last win for Jimmy Crute, October of 2020.
Wow.
All right, next up, featured prelim in the welterweight division, Nico Price minus 260. Robbie Lawler is plus 220. This is being billed as the final walk for the now 41-year-old ruthless Robbie Lawler. He'll be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame on Thursday, his fight against Rory McDonald. And I believe he will be there in person to accept on Thursday night in the middle of his weight cut, which is a pretty cool thing. It'll be Lawler's 25th UFC appearance, last fought during International Fight Week 2022, a TKO loss to Brian Barberina. Nico Price, you may recall, competitive against Phil Rowe last time out, but ended up getting finished there in round 3. Petrie, who do you got here? Nico Price, Robbie Lawler.
Man, I love me some Bob Lawler. I mean, some of the greatest moments ever in UFC. I mean, when Nick Diaz knocked him out, and that was the emergence of Nick Diaz back in the day, and all his stuff that he did outside the UFC as well. It's just, I mean, incredible. He knocked someone out in Hawaii, and the guy's family jumped in the ring against him. I mean, that's just legendary MMA stuff. I'm surprised he's only 41, but yeah, he looked good against a Nick Diaz who did not look good. Nick Diaz didn't want to be there. But he didn't look so good against Barberina, who I picked Robbie Lawler to win. I thought he would win that fight. Barberina's hittable. Robbie just kind of crumbled. Nico Price, same situation. Nico's mixing up more. He is a big, strong guy. He likes to mix it to the ground as well. He likes to bang on the feet. His striking, I don't think, is all that great. It's very pushy, and he's hittable, and he can be knocked out. I mean, he's been knocked out before in the UFC, is coming off a knockout. And when you're hanging plus 215, and I've been a UFC fan for so long, I'm not picking against Robbie Lawler. Listen, take my money. I'm going to bet this fight because a lot of people are like, oh, you're picking with your heart. Give us winners. I'm putting my own money on the line at plus 215 that Robbie Lawler is going to get it done. I would love for no more than him to go out on a high here. I do think this is a good matchup for him. I do think if he's motivated and aggressive, he can come out and he can win this fight for sure. But it's going to be tough because I don't know where his motivation at, considering what he did in the Barberina fight. Give me Bob Lawler plus 215. This is a bet I'm playing, and hopefully we come out on top with his swan song here. Love me some Lawler.
Kenny, I was a little bit surprised at the spread here. The number next to Robbie Lawler is plus 220. Nico Price is 7-6 with a pair of no contests in the UFC. Just one win since 2019, but nonetheless, pretty heavy favorite here against Robbie Lawler. I understand Lawler is 41. I thought Price showed, I love the kid, but next to no defensive responsibility at all against Phil Rowe. Your thoughts on Price here near 3-1 against ruthless Robbie Lawler?
Yeah, that's the big problem for me with Nico is that, he goes chin up in the air, starts swinging, gets a little crazy. Sometimes we'll play a clinch heavy game, which I think will serve him well here against Robbie Lawler. But do I see him taking down Robbie Lawler and consistently doing that with control? I don't. I think it's going to be another kind of crazy fight. And, like BP, if you're giving me plus 225 of Robbie Lawler being involved in one of those last fight, of his career, he's gonna find Nico Price's chin at some point. Nico is tough as nails. I love the kid. I love the way he fights. He's just, every time I've met him, he's been super nice. But I think there's a lot of value with Robbie here, just because of the nature of how Nico fights. I think you're going to keep that door open, and with a guy like Robbie Lawler with his power, and I think he'll still have that. I don't think he has the speed anymore. I don't think he has the ability to string together high volume combinations or anything like that, but Robbie can still put you out. And I think that's where Nico really has to be careful. I think there's a little bit too much value on Robbie Lawler at this stage of the game, with Nico at minus 265, a little high for me. So I'm with Brian on this one. I thought he was going to take Nico, but Brian's too smack for that.
How many kids does Nico Price have? Because Robbie Lawler has one, so he's got to have a lot of energy. How many does Nico have?
He's got a lot.
He's 6?
I was going to set the total at 5.5.
I think
I was going to go over. I think he has 6.
I think he has 6.
I remember back in the day it was 5, and it's like, bro, what are we doing here?
My dad comes from 10 brothers and sisters, and his dad and mom were tired all the time. So that's a lot.
I had a colleague at ESPN. He had Ted Williams' number 9 tattooed on his body because I thought he was one of 9 kids, and he was like, no, I'm number 9 of 15, all by the same mom who was pregnant for 150 months.
Wow. Golly.
Next up on the main card at lightweight, 10th ranked Jalen Turner is minus 240 against number 11 Dan Hooker, who comes back plus 200. As you guys know, this fight was to happen earlier this year at UFC 285 in March. Hooker forced out due to injury. Mateusz Gamrot stepped in, beat Jalen Turner by split decision. Now it shall be done. Hooker, last time out, big stoppage win over Claudio Puelles at UFC 281. I was on a big card, Bri. Really, he needed that win last year, and that set up this fight against Jalen Turner. Does he get his 13th UFC win, or do you like the tarantula?
So I took a hard look at Dan Hooker because his life is really ironing out. He's no longer a gym owner. He's focusing on himself. He used to teach classes all day, then train at night. He's just focusing on himself. He looked good against Claudio Puelles, and I think we're going to get a little bit of a wrestler. There's going to be D1 Dan Hooker in there. I think he's going to want to take Jalen Turner down because we saw what Gamrot can do, and Jalen Turner is okay off his back, but primarily stagnant, and then takedown offense has been a little bit of an issue in his career, but the fan in me wants it to be stand up. Both these guys are long. Both these guys do have good stand up. Jalen Turner is nasty on the feet. He is a little bit hittable, but Dan Hooker is so susceptible to body kicks and kicks in general. So I'm really interested to see how it plays out on the feet. I think Dan Hooker will switch up and wrestle a little bit, but I'm high on Turner. I think Turner gets his done here. I don't know if he finishes Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's very tough, but I think Turner is going to stop some of the takedowns. Not like Dan Hooker is a world-class wrestler. I think he's going to stop those takedowns. I think he's going to be nasty in the clinch. And I think when they fight at distance, I think Jalen Turner is the better fighter there as well. I think it's going to be a close fight, though. So sprinkling on minus or plus 210 for Dan Hooker by decision, maybe split decision, which will be extra juicy. Isn't the craziest thing in the world, but I do like Jalen Turner in this fight.
All right, Jalen Turner minus 240. Dan Hooker with all the new ink is plus 200. Ken-Flo, which way you going?
Yeah, I think that usual reach advantage that Dan Hooker has in his fights, where he can expose guys on the feet, is not going to be here against Jalen Turner, and that's my big concern for him. Because as Brian mentioned, he may try to take him down, but will he take him down? I don't think so. I think Jalen Turner learned a lot from that last fight against Gamrot. Gamrot didn't easily take him down necessarily, but he did control him pretty easily. And I don't see him taking him down easily at all. I think Turner is huge for the division, like Hooker. I think he's going to be able to outstrike Dan. And I'm not sure he finishes him. He could finish him, but I think he's going to be able to outpoint him. I think Turner is a guy that is growing and getting better, and I'm high on him. And I like this matchup for him. I think this is great matchmaking here. Dan Hooker is very skilled, but sometimes he goes in there a little too tentative with his strikes and doesn't throw a whole lot of volume. I think he's in an interesting dilemma here, because if he goes in there tentative and tries to be too technical, he allows Turner to take over. If he goes in there very aggressive, I think Turner is the heavier hitting guy, and it opens himself up. So I think this is a tough one for Dan. I would love to see him do well, but I think Turner's going to be a little bit too good, a little bit too big, and a little bit too technical here.
Ken-Flo was there in Auckland, New Zealand when Dan Hooker made his UFC debut back in 2014. You can tell Ken-Flo's got a little soft spot for Dan Hooker. And clearly, to your point, Kenny, the matchmaking, right? They liked this fight so much they put it together twice. We'll see how it plays out live on pay-per-view this weekend. And we will go right back to Ken-Flo now. Featured bout at middleweight. Former champ Robert Whittaker, minus 390 versus Dricus du Plessis, who is plus 320. Du Plessis desiring to go through Whittaker to get to the title fight. You've got to admire that. But man, does this figure to be a challenge, Kenny, given the matchup. The thought of either of these guys turning around to face Izzy in 8 or 9 weeks is just insane. But first things first, your thoughts on Whittaker, Kenny, a near 4-1 favorite here against the South African Dricus du Plessis.
Yeah, I think that Robert Whittaker's wrestling is going to be the key to victory here, right? I think it's pretty obvious for everyone watching this because, Dricus du Plessis, his pacing, his conditioning, it is impressive, but his technical ability is really not being offensive here. But I think that, if you're going against someone like Whittaker, who has been at this a very long time, who is one of the most technical fighters, most well-rounded fighters in the UFC, you have to have something skill-wise to really test him. Thankfully, Dricus du Plessis is extremely tough. He's extremely durable. He will push through some very bad spots, but Whittaker has been there as well. This isn't a 3-fight veteran in Robert Whittaker. He's been around the block and back many, many times. Obviously, former world champion here. So I think this is a very difficult fight for Dricus du Plessis. I don't see him winning this unless Whittaker is sick or injured. I just don't see him winning this. And I think I'm so confident in this one that I'm willing to put a 5-bet unit on Robert Whittaker just because I think, I don't know. I just, unless some fluke thing happens, and even then, du Plessis, maybe he lands some flying knee or something, but he doesn't have the power in his hands. He doesn't have the submission skills. Whittaker's just so good everywhere, man. I don't see it happening. So Whittaker +5.
5-unit smacker on Robert Whittaker for Kenny Florian. That's $1,950 to yield 500. And I talked earlier in the week, Brian, suggested that if Dricus du Plessis beats Whittaker and Adesanya back-to-back in a 9-week span, it's the most impressive thing we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. Du Plessis is 29 years of age. He is 5-0 in the UFC. And there have been big wins, undeniably. Brad Tavares, Darren Till, Derek Brunson. None of those guys is Robert Whittaker, who makes his 20th UFC appearance here. 15-4 for Whittaker in the big show. And his only losses in the last 9.5 years have come against the last stylebender, Israel Adesanya. So with that backdrop, your thoughts on Whittaker, du Plessis, and ultimately who takes it?
Well, that was my 5-unit play as well. Kenny just ripped it right from under me. So retroactively, I do want to put 5 units on Bo Nickel now, if we can do that, Johnny, please, because I don't want to go 5 units. Listen, for the people that are listening, load up responsibly. Load up on Robert Whittaker, because I'm like Kenny. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think Dricus du Plessis kind of talked his way into this with some of the controversial things he said. Is he kind of pissed? Is he off? Whatever. Because the guy is just okay, right? That's the truth. And I know he had the nose surgery and in the air and everything, but he's just okay. He blitzes in. It's not the most impressive stand-up. He might hit hard, but he's not one-touching anybody. His wrestling is good. It's not great. I mean, you're beating a Darren Till who quit the UFC after that fight. You're beating a Derek Brunson who's 1 foot out the UFC. You're beating Marcus Perez, who's no longer in the promotion. You're beating these guys great, and your toughness is taking you there. Your cardio, the willingness to push. But this is Robert Whittaker. This is Bobby fucking Knuckles. This dude is the best middleweight not named Israel Adesanya. Point blank, period. I don't care what other promotion is going to say. Well, we got the no. This is the guy not named Israel Adesanya. And if Izzy wasn't here, he'd be the champion. His striking's fast. His wrestling's good. His cardio is unbelievable. His toughness on point. His mental's good. I think he absolutely walks through Dricus du Plessis here. I don't know if we're going to finish because we've all commented how tough he is, but I think he's going to show levels above here. And it's Bobby Knuckles all day. Give me Robert Whittaker.
And one storyline that you're going to hear us hammer is this deviated septum surgery that Dricus du Plessis had seemingly around the time that he accepted this fight. So I know a lot of you fighters are much tougher than me. You break your face and Kyle Dawkins is back training like 3 or 4 weeks later. But in terms of the timeline, I would imagine du Plessis would have liked to have had more time, even though he will not admit as much to my face in the fighter meeting. All right. Co-headliner for the UFC Flyweight Championship, Brandon Moreno now -200. Alexandre Pantoja +170. Some pretty significant line movement over the last 72 hours. We've seen Moreno go from -170 to -200 on DraftKings Sportsbook. The history is a huge part of this. So Pantoja defeated Brandon Moreno on The Ultimate Fighter by submission in 2016. Then he beat Moreno by unanimous decision. It was May 19th, 2018. 30-26 was the consensus scorecard. That first round, a 10-8, according to most, for Alexandre Pantoja. But since then, Moreno has only gone 7-1-2 and been involved in 5 straight championship fights. Bri, as great as the rivalry between Figueiredo and Moreno was, this is absolutely a rivalry in its own right. I can't wait to see how this fight plays out because Pantoja might be one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world that nobody seemingly is talking about. Your thoughts on the co-main event?
Yeah, Pantoja's won me a lot of money. For some reason, like a year and a half ago, some of these fights, he was falling really low. And he's done it with his hands. I think he is phenomenal on the ground. His jiu-jitsu is very good, especially when he takes your back. His rear naked choke is very, very good. But he's setting these wins up with his hands. And that's what he kind of did in the second Moreno fight. Moreno, though, I've watched them both back a lot. Moreno is not the same fighter. Pantoja's gotten better, But Brandon Moreno's gotten a lot better and by more confident in his hands, and he's willing to exchange. His kicks are there. He didn't really have kicks the second time they fought. The first time they fought, he was the last ranked guy in the tournament on the Ultimate Fighter. Like, he is known for he started in jiu-jitsu. Now he's starting to become a well-rounded mixed martial arts. He's got a whole camp dedicated to him. And the first fight in the UFC, the second fight, it was he just didn't throw enough volume. He wasn't landing enough strikes. And I think that's what this fight's going to play out. Pantoja gives up a lot of takedowns. Moreno lands some takedowns. He did in their second fight. I don't know if he wants to play that game. I think he can stay on the feet. Pantoja, very fast, very mobile with his feet. But Moreno has a good way of cutting the cage off, throwing good kicks, good hands, and confident. He's feeling himself in there, which I love. If it gets to the ground, I think Pantoja is a little bit better, but it's not like Brandon Moreno's a fish out of the water. Minus 180 is a generous line. I like that line from Moreno. This was another one that I really struggled on who was going to pick. Once I dove into the tape and listened to this old Midwestern gut, I went, oh, it's Moreno retaining here. I think he's going to look pretty good doing it as well.
All right, minus 180 no longer available on DraftKings Sportsbook on Brandon Moreno. We'll see where the line closes. Kenny, Pantoja actually replaced Ray Borg in that spot in Chile back in 2018 when they fought officially in the UFC. And Pantoja 6-2 since that fight. He's never been finished in 30 fights as an MMA pro. And I feel like in terms of the best fighters casual fans haven't heard of, Pantoja might be the pound for pound king. Now's his opportunity to lean into that Moreno fan base and get it and get the world title. Kenny, your thoughts on the Pajumpina trained Pantoja in his first UFC title fight this weekend?
Yeah, I think Pantoja definitely has gotten better. Is he able to sustain that lead that he had over Moreno way back in 2018? I don't think so. I think that he's a high energy fighter. He's got a lot of different skills. He's very, very good. But I think where Pantoja runs into trouble is when he starts experiencing roadblocks. He tends to kind of not be able to adjust, in my opinion, quite like Brandon Moreno can. And I think that's where he will face some issues here in this fight. I think that there's certain spots where he can outpoint Moreno, but Moreno's going to be there and he's going to be in his face. He's going to make adjustments. It's going to be a beautiful dance back and forth, in my opinion. Can he keep up and adjust throughout the fight, though? That's the question. Brandon Moreno has had a lot of title fight experience, a lot of high-level experience as of late, way higher, in fact, than Pantoja. So this, to me, is a tricky one because there's no question about it. Pantoja is very skilled and he's very dangerous. And if there's a guy that is more likely to get the finish, I actually think it's Pantoja than it is Moreno. However, I'm with BP here. I like Moreno. I like his experience. I like his composure and his ability to adapt, which I think is going to be the difference in this title fight, but it's going to be fun while it lasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it might get pretty contentious during the week, as some of you will recall when Moreno for a second time became the undisputed champion. Pantoja was all up in his face backstage. I'm next, and Pantoja's next, and he deserves to be next. But we'll see if that gave Moreno a little extra motivation in preparation for this one. All right, that brings us to the final act, International Fight Week 2023 featherweight title unification bout. Alexander Volkanovski minus 390 against the interim champion Yair Rodriguez, who is plus 320. So Volk became the man in this division back in December of 2019. He's never lost in the weight class, but of course he moved up to challenge Islam Makhachev, and that paved the way for an interim title fight. Yair Rodriguez performed brilliantly that night, and that sets up his shot at the great Volkanovski. No doubt Yair's come into his own. I think he's in his fighting prime. I think, as Dominic Cruz says, he's one of one. The question beckons Brian Petrie.
Yes.
Does he have enough? Can he win this main event and beat Alexander the Great Volkanovski?
No disrespect to other sports. I love my football, but how do you not get fucking pumped up for this? I am so excited for this fucking fight. People who do not watch this, I feel bad for you. Listen, the line's crazy. If you're a value boy and you watch Yair play a fight Emmett, you're like 3-1. What? Yeah, give me that fucking plus money. I dove deep in, spent all weekend getting the old brain ready. And I think it's going to come down to Volkanovski's grappling, actually. He did a very grappling heavy camp with for the Islam camp, and Yair gets taken down quite a bit. He's very good off his back. We saw the Ortega, we saw Emmett, but he does get taken down and get beat up. I think that still is the blueprint here. I think you cannot give Yair space with those kicks, how fast he is. You just can't do it. I know Alex I watched the countdown show. He's going, hey, people think I'm going to do what you do, but do it better. And he posted a picture of like a spinning kick. I hope that's mind games. I think Volkanovski is one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world, right? But let's just not do that, right? I think his volume, his movement is great. I mean, Yair, when he fought Max, he gave up 3 takedowns to Max. He also got outstruck. I think Volkanovski has that same volume, can outstrike Yair, but the space and the speed scares me with Yair. But I do think Volkanovski's a smart fighter. Joe Osborne's a smart coach. They're going to close it down. They're going to get him to the ground. They're going to rough him up. We've obviously seen Volkanovski's submission defense against Brian Ortega. It's pretty good. Even if you get him in something tight, guy ain't quitting. So I like Volkanovski here, but I do think the line is crazy wide. I think Yair has a ton of value for anyone out there. I think he's an exceptional fighter, but I can't pick against Volkanovski at this point. I think he's going to get it done.
Volkanovski minus 390, the favorite right now on DraftKings Sportsbook. Kenny, some people believe that Josh Emmett, given his physical stature, the way he's built, and his style, would have been a tougher matchup for Alexander Volkanovski. I don't agree with that. But it seems like a lot of the fighters in Sharps I Trust are all over the place when it comes to this fight and Yair Rodriguez's chances in it. So I will pass the baton to you, Ken-Flo. Your thoughts on this featherweight title unification about to close out International Fight Week 2023.
Well, I think the big issue with Yair Rodriguez, and I mean this in a good way, is the fact that he's extremely dangerous. And I talk about this every single time I talk about Yair Rodriguez, but his speed is just different. He moves at such a speed that it's surprising every single time I watch him fight. And, you know, if you're talking about his speed, you got to talk about his kicks. He'll throw them. You don't really see him coming. And he is absolutely fearless with what he throws and how he throws it. Don't think that Yair is going to be taken or overtaken by the bright lights here in this main event. He will not. He has never shown that. And as he was coming up, I remember watching him and I go, man, he's dangerous. He's got a lot of potential, but does this pretty boy have durability? Does he have toughness? Does he have a chin? Unfortunately for everyone, 145 pounds, yeah, he does. He really, really does. And that's what makes this such an interesting fight, is that from a danger perspective, dude, he is one of the most dangerous at 145 pounds, one of the few that Volkanovski must absolutely respect as far as getting finished in a professional mixed martial arts contest. Yair Rodriguez is capable of doing that. Now, I think that's what's going to bring out the best in Volkanovski, who is so fundamentally sound. He doesn't really make mistakes. There's certain opportunities that you can take advantage, maybe on the ground if you're a Brian Ortega, but even then, Ortega couldn't finish those spots, and those were about as good as it gets as far as finishing opportunities. Volkanovski has recognized the fact that he has been susceptible on the ground in the past due to the Ortega fight and all that stuff. And he was working with Craig Jones way back when. Well, he's been flying Craig Jones to Australia. He's been flying him out to Vegas. He's been working with Craig Jones, who is one of the best in the world when it comes to submission grappling. He's also a fantastic jiu-jitsu coach as well. He's absolutely brilliant. So, the fact that those two Australians have united forces does not bode well for the rest of the division. So I think that I don't see him making a whole lot of mistakes. And I agree with Brian. I think a ground game should be a part of the strategy here against Yair Rodriguez, who has shown vulnerabilities positionally on the ground. Submission-wise, he's still very dangerous there, but positionally, I think he's vulnerable. And so Volkanovski, in regards to taking up space and pressuring someone like Yair Rodriguez, it has to be there. He's got to be in his face. And I think that you have a much better chance of beating Rodriguez when you're in his face and backing him up, and that also will take away his kicking game and also will force Rodriguez into making some unforced errors, in my opinion, because he is very aggressive, and he never won't be aggressive. And I think those will throw him off balance, allow Volkanovski to get on top and utilize his ground and pound and position game to win rounds and potentially even finish the fight. So I like Volkanovski here. I just don't see a whole lot of vulnerabilities here. Rodriguez is dangerous, man, and I think his best chance of winning this fight is actually by finishing it. I don't see him outpointing Volkanovski over the course of 5 rounds. Give me Alexander Volkanovski.
Tremendously done by both of you gentlemen on that main event, and it really makes me feel good to hear somebody on Kenny Florian's level say about Yair Rodriguez, and this is a direct quote, "It's surprising every time I watch him fight, of his speed and of his kicking game." Because for me, it's like, dude, every time I watch him fight, I'm like, what the fuck, man? He's faster. Like, it's insane. Every time he fights. And then I see plus 320 next to his name, right? Yeah. And I understand Volkanovski might have the highest fight IQ in the game plan execution, no glaring weaknesses, doesn't make mistakes. He's unchokeable. But plus 320 next to an athlete like that is fundamentally insane.
And he's mean, too. He's nasty in there. He's mean.
Brian, do you have any other selections that you would like to give our audience for UFC 290?
Just one? Yeah, no. I got Vitor Petrino. I think this kid is a fucking stud, right? Reminds me a lot when I take my shirt off with his body.
That's right.
Yeah, no, he's got takedowns. He's got power. He's fighting Marcin Prachnigau. Prachnigau has obviously had a chin problem. He's also got a little bit of a cardio gas problem. You got Vitor at minus 275. That's a multi-unit play right there. Let's go.
All right, so you are taking Vitor Petrino minus 275 for 1 unit here for our purposes. Is that right?
I already did 5, so I can't do another.
So Ken-Flo last week went with multiple fights with more than 1 unit. So
sure. I would, but Bo's so high, so I want to keep all 5 on Bo. Just telling the people at home, listen, if you got a fat bankroll and you're looking for spots, because some of these are wide, a lot of these fights can get a little wide here. Vitor minus 275 is a really good play.
All right, Brian Petrie, unafraid. Vitor Petrino minus 275. If you want more from Brian Petrie, he has his own show, the MMA Takes podcast, and on social media. Mostly Twitter for this guy. Pretty good Instagram as well. But mostly a Twitter engager at Brian Petrie MMA. BP, enjoy the festivities, my man. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, boys. Have a good weekend. I'll see you.
All right, there he is. Brian Petrie with us for the main event challenge. And that wraps our UFC 290 preview. We are back with you live on Monday to recap the entire International Fight Week 2023. And don't forget, me and Ken-Flo will be live from UFC X for a live episode of the Anik and Florian podcast this Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Please come see us and say hello. I can't speak for Ken-Flo's schedule, but I'm going to hang out for a full hour after that show as well. So if anybody wants photos or just want to hang out, talk about the show, we will be there and hope to see many of you on Friday. Thank you to Brian Petrie. Thanks to our executive producer, Cody Merrill. For Ken-Flo, I'm John Anik. Thank you all for watching on the DraftKings Network, DraftKings YouTube channel, and for listening wherever it is that you do that. We will talk to you in less than 7 days. Until then, you'll live.